officially on second episode of the Smith Pod.
Yes, sir. Episode number 2.
The name is still TBD, right?
We'll get there. I think it's just
We'll get there. Let's just roll it out. We're rolling it out. We're getting used to it.
It's gonna come to us.
For sure. So great to have you, man.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Vice President, how's it feel?
Feels great. I mean, if you would have asked me 4 years ago if I would be sitting in this chair, I would say no way. Well, probably 6 years ago. So sitting here now is, it's like, how those things happen in life. It's serendipity,
Take us back to California. Give us a little bit of background of who Seth Woods is and kind of how you came up.
Yeah, so I grew up in Ventura, California. It's about an hour north of LA. It's a small beach town. Grew up there, lived in the same house my whole life, played sports in high school, water polo and swimming. But at the same time, I grew up in a household, a musical household. My dad is a professional musician and has been since he was my age. So I was always around music, played drums a little bit here and there. It was never really that serious. Second year of junior college, somehow I started playing more and getting into it. Really, I got the bug. I got the virus, as they say.
The virus.
There's a moment where every musician plays something and you're like, oh, this is what I have to do for the rest of my life, So from that point on, I was all in. I practiced 8 hours a day, literally, would sit in my garage, taking lessons from top LA guys, LA session musicians,
So you were like practicing with like the best.
I was all in, trying to do as many gigs as I can. There's a lot I had to learn before I could really start being a professional. So, I did my first professional gig at 19. It was a wedding in Santa Barbara.
Wow.
And then started progressing more and more, and then got to a point where it was like, okay, I can't just live at home with my parents playing in my garage. Got to do something. It's time to launch. And at the time, my dad was touring with Paul Anka, and one of the guys on the band was the band director for University of Frost School of Music, their top big band. And he was like, hey, have Seth come down and audition. We give scholarships. And at that point, it was either go to LA, try and get to a state school there, or just take lessons and do gigs, and like a lot of people have in the past, or come down here to Miami, extend my education, get a degree. And at that point, that decision, I was itching to get out of Ventura. The idea of coming to Miami was obviously appealing.
Yeah.
The other side of the country, away from everything that I'd ever known. It's literally as different as you can get.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was really into that. I really wanted something else.
You were excited to come to Miami.
So I got a scholarship, came down.
So how old were you there?
I moved down here when I was 23.
23.
Yeah.
And what, you just had you had some money, you came, you had family, or you just kind of said, you know what?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I got a scholarship, so
Okay.
that covered a lot of the living expenses. If I didn't get that scholarship, I wouldn't have come.
Right.
But it was just, I put a lot of work in, literally hours a day. And so, I got an opportunity and I took it. I moved down, and it was surreal. I'm 23 and I'm in class with kids that are like 18, just out of high school, that are playing at such a high level. It was like, what planet are you from, dude? How did you do this? It just did not compute to see someone that young playing that well.
That's crazy.
And I remember one of the ensembles that we had, after the rehearsal, we're packing up, and the saxophone player, who I still know today, and we're good friends, but afterwards, he was like, yo, Seth, you suck, dude.
He told you like that?
Yeah. And I was like, deer in the headlights, like, okay.
Really?
Okay, Mr. Dave, Everyone seemed older, but I was older than him.
And you're still cool with him?
Yeah, he's great.
So yeah, you suck, but we're still cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did that last?
So graduated school, and I met my wife at UM. We now have 3 kids. So, when I graduated, at that point, my wife and I, Alex, I was telling her, look, I want to move to New York. I'm going to be a jazz drummer. This is my dream. I'm an artist. I need this. this is, this is it. This is what I've worked my whole life for. She's like, yeah, okay, sure, I mean, at that point, I knew that was what I was going to do.
Yeah.
But like, I told her, I'm going to stay here for a little bit. I was working in town, doing gigs.
So when did you get married? Like what were you doing when you got married?
Yeah, so I was a professional musician, playing gigs, doing weddings, corporates.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, man.
No.
Where did the transition to real estate come in?
Yeah, so once we got married, at that point I was still all in on music.
Okay.
I wanted to go tour, because for a musician to make a living, there's only a few different paths. There's a limited amount of paths you can take, and especially being in a tertiary market like Miami in terms of music, it was either weddings, playing with a Latin artist, or studio. But even the studio work was drying up, and I wasn't really in that scene, and I hadn't really developed those studio chops. So, so I started playing around, doing weddings, and I got an opportunity to tour with an artist named Paul Anka. I toured with him for 2 years. Right around that time, I had our first child. My wife had it. I was just there.
Just enjoy the ride.
You can do it, honey. So at that point, everything changed. You have 3 children. You know how it is.
Yeah.
The fire was lit. And my whole focus changed from a selfish mentality of I want to be an artist and I need to express myself to, I need to provide for this other life.
Things got real.
I was also managing a private event band, so we do a lot of weddings. So I'm talking to brides and grooms, and I was just a means to an end, so that I could secure gigs and it paid the bills. But no one likes to talk to brides or grooms from a vendor standpoint. I had a groom, it was like really early on. He would call me every day in the month leading up to the wedding. And I'm not the planner. That's crazy. I'm just the band guy, So
what do you tell this guy?
So he's just like, hey, Seth, how you doing, man? Yeah, I'm just on the way home. And I just this wedding. He would just call the vent. And like, hey, you want? I kind of felt bad for him, but inevitably, the call would lead to, hey, can we do this? Can we do this? I'm thinking about moving this around. So anyway, that's when the thought in my mind of like, maybe I should think about doing something else came in.
So where did real estate, but not just real estate, industrial real estate come into place? Like, so out of all things you can do, from music to selling warehouses.
So we had another child, Eloise, our second, and
it got real.
It got even realer. Now it's the realest. I have 3. So around that time that Eloise was born, my family connected with a family member that we didn't know existed. This guy, Jeff Kapchek, from Chicago's CBRE office. He's a really, really successful broker up there, and developed a great relationship, and he's an incredible person. He's super successful. He's a family guy. He's got 3 sons. He's 50 years old, so he's about 25 years my senior. So through that relationship and that development, we just started talking, and I was expressing how I wanted to make a change, and obviously he was doing really, really well, so that was really appealing. So the conversation started to go to, so how do you do this? What do you do exactly, and how do you do that? And he said, look, just get your license. That's where, start there. So I said, okay, let's go,
All right, so fast forward, you get your license?
Get my license. And at that point, by that time, I was so done with booking weddings and playing weddings. I was like, I don't care what firm I go to.
Too many phone calls, the wives calling you, or I'm sorry, the bride's calling you.
Someone's wife.
Someone's wife. Calling you before, weeks before the wedding.
Yeah, I was like, I can't.
The in-laws calling, I'm sure.
God, too many stories. I got my license, and actually another family friend, her son was a broker at an office here in town, and it just turned out he was in industrial, and I, from Jeff's influence, was like, warehouses are cool. I want to go that route. I think the thing that stuck out to me about warehouses is it's the back it's like behind the curtain of the economy.
Yeah, it's like the backbone. It's the backbone of the economy.
Everything that you see, this cup, this chair, my shoes, your shirt, everything that is physical goes through a warehouse. And the idea to have like a look behind the curtain on what that actually means is just so interesting to me, you know, and everything that supply chain and those facilities mean for the economy, and what that means for the broader world, you know. So that, for me, it was a no-brainer.
So you start industrial, you get into this firm.
Yeah, it was with Wes LaPrade at Beacon Commercial Realty, and he was great. An amazing mentor. Has been in the business for 30 years. I learned a ton from him, and you know, not only from him, but just from being in that environment. So they focused on a lot of small bay deals, and so I was doing 1,000 square foot leases, 2,500 if I was lucky, you know. And
that's the best way to learn.
I didn't even realize it at the time, but now looking back, I was like,
yeah, because if you get put through that grinder, I tell anyone, 1,000, 2,000, anything under 5,000 square feet, if you can do those deals, you're gonna be, I mean, great. You'll be an expert in industrial.
Yeah, it's a grind. You know, you have this like T-shirt company who, you know, these two guys showing up in flip-flops and gold chains, and like, yeah, this is sick. You know, where's the lease? What's a lease? I'll sign it, whatever. You know, it's like, dude, you need to read it. He's like, nah, it's gonna be fine. You know, all right. Good luck. You know. But, you know, through all that, I knew, and I think it was from talking to Jeff, I knew that I wanted to do bigger deals. I knew it was not an end-all be-all for me. I knew it was not going to be my only shop.
So when you started, you knew you were going to be there to learn, I guess, the ropes, but you knew you weren't going to be there long term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew right away.
Okay, cool. And what made that transition? Well, let's go back. Hold on. Yeah. Your first cold call. Let's go there.
So,
how's your first cold call? You get in the business. They're saying, "Hey, you got to make calls," or how that all transpired.
Yeah, you know, when I first got in, I was like, I don't want to do cold calls. I don't want. That's not me. You know, I'm better face to face. But then COVID hit, and you know, my family was super buttoned up, and we locked down. I'm like, well, I gotta make connections somehow. I guess I have to do cold calls. So I talked to a guy in our office, Harry Jordan, you know, and he's like, yeah, just call them and ask if they need real estate services. I'm like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound like it's gonna produce anything, but gotta do it. So I called the Finger Lakes, which is a region in Doral.
So yeah. You left the down south area and you went to Doral.
Well, there was just no big deals down there. And you know, these are like 10,000 square foot buildings in Finger Lakes. So at the time, those were like enormous. So I started with the Finger Lakes, said, all right, I'm just going to farm this area. And I just went up and down all the streets and called all the businesses, and they all said, no, we don't need any real estate services. Lose this number. Okay. And you know, I'd be like, okay, thank you, sir, you know, or ma'am, and hang up and go to the next one.
Was there any training as far as like,
no,
hey, this is what to do in a cold call, this is what to say?
No, and
or how to leave voicemails. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and you know, for not to talk badly about Beacon, because I'm not doing that at all. It was just, you know, the two senior brokers, they've been in the business for 30 years. They already have their contacts. You know, they were door knockers. They didn't really cold call. That wasn't their method. So, you know, I don't think there was a lot of training to be given. You know, there was a lot of other great information that I learned. But as far as like the art of cold calling, a lot of YouTubing, a lot of podcasts, all the books.
Which is one thing I admire from you, man. I have to say, the way that you go out of your way to research and to dig into information. You teach yourself these things, you know, like how to cold call or look up articles on what's the latest trend or the latest secret to marketing or whatever it is. I highly admire that from you.
Oh, thank you.
Because
thank you.
You know, and I told you from the beginning, I was like, send me messages at whatever time and let's keep that momentum going, because that's, you know, I feed off of that. So
well, that was, I mean, honestly, that was a big reason I came here, is because, right away it was like, okay, this guy gets it, But I think what you're talking about, I've always been curious, but I think that that searching came from, I don't think I know that searching came from music and my training as a musician, because what music teaches you, it's not just chords and beats and notes and how to play in a band and all the technical stuff, but it teaches you how to learn. Because ultimately someone can show you, so I play drums. Someone can show you a beat, but it doesn't mean anything unless you sit there and figure out how to do it for yourself. So if I hear something heard something on a record, I'd have to sit there for 3 hours to even recognize what he was playing. Then I'd have to go for another 6 hours to figure out how to play it, and then have to play it for 3 months to even get it to come out in my playing to
master it
at a live setting. So that process showed me, first of all, I can learn anything now, and I've just been able to carry that into real estate in this new, the new at the time career.
That's great. That's great.
I tell everyone I know that has kids that are thinking about putting them in music, it's a must. Because of that. It's not just that you learn how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. It's that you have discipline to sit there and really suck at it for a long time. But you push through that and are able to do it at the end, And
man, that's great, because I'm not a person that's musically inclined at all. I've never played any instruments. So it's good to understand, at least your point of view, why it's important to have that background, because it teaches you discipline, right? How to suck at something for a long time until you master it, which is a great tool or great experience that you can take with you in real estate.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're going to suck at door knocking, at making calls, but until you master it, then it becomes kind of like second nature.
Yeah.
So that's a great, insight.
Well, it's the doing.
It's the doing. That's it.
Everyone wants a shortcut. I do too, And ultimately, I'm going to be honest, when I look at all the YouTube videos, I'm looking for the shortcut.
Yeah.
But it doesn't exist, because you just have to pick up the phone and get your reps in.
Right.
You have to sound like a schmuck on the phone and not know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And eventually you get better.
Right.
Hopefully.
Yeah. That's it.
I think it's inevitable that you will, as long as you have, the searching mentality.
Man, tell me about your first deal. The first deal you did at Beacon. How was that? How was the experience? What'd you take from it? What'd you learn?
Yeah, it was like, fire hydrant to the face, drinking out of a fire hydrant. It was a small lease. It was actually someone that I cold called because I saw some vacancy. It was like a 20 unit multi-bay warehouse project. And I'm actually still connected with the owner today. And I just said, hey, how are you? This is Seth Woods from Beacon Commercial Realty. I've got some clients that are looking for space. Do you have anything available? And from there, we just developed a relationship, and it went really well. And I eventually got the listing. I put a sign up, and they let me lease their space. And it was great. Now the things that I learned was, every deal is different. Because at the time I was looking like, okay, what's the way that you do it? Like, what's the process? And everyone in the office is like laughing at me, like, no, there is no process. You just do the deal and hope for the best.
It's kind of like every deal you have to roll with the punches. There's always a punch.
Yeah.
So you have to roll with everything and kind of just go around it.
Yeah.
Right? And figure everyone's different. So everyone's character is different. So it's just a matter of kind of rolling with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's something I wanted to ask you is, you do have more of a process, I think, but I think it comes from the years of seeing what works. When you go into a deal, do you have kind of a mental idea of already how it's going to go and, problems that can come up? How do you think about the process of doing a deal?
I call it the human AI. Just because you've done it so many times, you kind of know what can go wrong, what can go right, based on how they said things, based on how, their communication starts to happen. You kind of have a mental idea of how that situation is going to happen.
Yeah.
If someone gets an offer and they don't respond for a few days, meaning they're not as motivated, that's an example. Or they're not being as responsive, or someone that is responsive is the opposite, right? So every deal is different. So, but you kind of know and start to understand people's characters and habits a little bit better in every transaction. So you understand, okay, this person most likely is not going to do one thing, so I have to get on top of them a little bit more to confirm that doubt that you have. So it's not good to I guess, assume, right? But you want to affirm it by following up a little bit more to make sure that person affirms it for you. Because sometimes someone is out of town or they're very busy, but they do want to, lease this space, but they just can't get around to it. So there's different things. You got to kind of drip on them a little bit more, do more follow-ups. Some people do require more follow-ups than others. So, that's one thing. Your first deal, that's great. Tell us about, we spoke about the first cold call, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember your first cold call?
No, it was one of the Finger Lakes deals, or one of the Finger Lakes calls. Yeah, I was so nervous, like palms sweating, heart's racing. I must have researched that property for like 2 hours just to find exactly who I was going to ask for, because I was worried they were going to laugh me off the phone, So going through property appraiser's site, and then, we didn't have CoStar at the time. So I, was Googling every nook and cranny of this person's identity, and then I make the call finally, and they're like, no, they're not here. Goodbye.
Now, given that experience, how much do you research someone now before you call?
As long as I have an idea of where the property is.
Oh, yeah, I have a number? That's where they're at? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
basically.
it?
That's it.
Phone number, address.
Yeah. Because from there, the whole point of, all the information that you have that you're researching could be completely wrong anyway. And the discovery process is how you build rapport and get, that's how you build the relationship, get the right information. Or maybe you figure out that the owner is full of shit and they're lying to you and they don't actually own it, and it's their brother who they're estranged from has it, locked up in a lawsuit or something. All those kinds of things will come to light through talking to the person. And I've realized that it's just a matter of making the call, talking to them, figuring out, what they need, if anything. And sometimes I'm a lot more. I want to get to know a lot faster now. I'm a lot happier when they say no, we're not going to sell, because then it's like, okay, now on to the next. Thank you.
Quicker to get to a no.
Yeah.
Or a yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how did you do the transition how did that transition happen from Beacon to Smith?
Yeah.
For the record, those who don't know.
For the record, my dad is a organic certifier, and he had a client who was looking for 2,500 square feet of cooler space.
I remember that call like it was yesterday.
Yeah, of cooler space. And you had been popping up on LinkedIn. You had some listings. You were the only guy that was advertising himself as a cold storage expert. And I think kind of even still today, we are really one of the only shops in town that specialize in that asset class. So I just called you up and said, hey, do you have any vacancy? I got a guy looking for 2,500 square feet. And I could tell, you didn't laugh, but your face laughed.
How do you know my face laughed? We were on the phone.
I could just tell, you're like, no. No.
No, I was very honest.
Yeah,
I don't think I disrespected you.
No, it wasn't disrespectful.
I think it was very professionally, straight to the point.
Yeah, and I think that, that led into a conversation about, hey, what, who are you? We've never spoken before. You want to make sure you know everyone in town.
Right.
So we started talking. I just told you where I'm at, and from there it led to, hey, come down, let's have a meeting. let's talk about what you're looking to do. And at that time, it was like perfect timing because I was already looking somewhere else to go. But, when we had lunch, the things that you brought up about marketing, thinking about, how to reach customers in different ways, because at the shop I was at before, it was very cut and dry, put up a sign, put it up on LoopNet, and that works for sure. But I think now more than ever, with all the tools that we have, you have to use everything at your disposal. There's so many brokers, and now there's even more sellers because of all the platforms that are doing it themselves. They don't really see the value in having a broker on their side. So, an advisor who knows what the lease rates are, what the market is, who the players are, are they being unrealistic about the lease rate or sale price? If you're running a distribution company for plumbing parts, it's not your day-to-day. Our day-to-day is to know the market, to know what all those stats are. And actually to that point, it took me a long time to realize what we actually do and what the value is that we offer. And I think that's why the cold calls were so hard, is because I don't even know what I'm selling these people, really. I'm just selling them.
So what do we do?
Pick. It was like pick me to put up a sign, man. It's like, how do you sell that? It really is an advisory role, and you need someone on. As a broker, what we do is give people the best tools to create the most amount of value. It's everyone uses that word, but get you the most money possible. Because I think by not using a broker, you're leaving money on the table.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're also wasting time, right? So let's say you have it overpriced, it's going to sit there empty. If you're trying to lease, property is going to sit there unsold. It's going to be tainted because everyone's like, "What's wrong with this property? Why hasn't it sold yet? There must be something wrong." So by using a broker, you go around and save yourself a ton of time and a lot of money.
Yeah, no, 100%. And a lot of owners, landlords, investors, some don't understand that.
No.
The value of a broker. So you just nailed it,
The value of a good broker.
Of a good broker.
Yeah.
Because obviously you have to know if they're a good broker. Let's talk about, why would an owner hire a boutique brokerage versus a national brokerage? I think this is a great one.
Yeah. So, the big firms, let's say the big three, CBRE, JLL, Cushman & Wakefield, incredible platforms. What I think a firm like ours offers, the idea of a personalized approach, I think is often too used. I think what we offer is the ability to think outside the box, to offer different marketing strategies that the big guys can't do because it's not on brand, and now more than ever, you need those thinking outside the box strategies. Direct marketing to your ideal client, using database and data analytics to find the right shop. Data mining to make sure that you are going after the right group of people. All those tools, it's been completely democratized. It used to be that the big three were the only one, or the big national shops were the only ones that had access to those, but now everyone does. So now it's an issue of, who's going to give you the best service with the best tools, and not only that, know how to leverage them to get you the best value for your property. And I think because we're a boutique firm, and we're able to be really nimble with how we react to things. If one strategy isn't working, we got to go to the next one, because ideally, we are working for our clients.
How about local? Your relationships on the local government or area.
100%.
Because remember, the term farm is an old school term that you don't see today as much. So a lot of these larger firms are too busy with the assignments that they have from their clients, the 100%. Landlords, and the big parks. So they're constantly servicing those parks. So what happens is they don't have the time or the bandwidth to take on, to go out of their way to contact, a commissioner that's in the, in that district, or someone that's, a local inspector. They don't have those local resources, to make, to make that first impression, or that, to make that listing even that much, easier to sell or lease.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. The problem solving,
really, because they're on a national scale. And usually what happens most of the time is they hire the juniors. Then you got to do all the grunt work.
Yeah.
Which is different. You have some junior college, young graduate kind of calling you, doesn't know really the ins and outs. He just has his CBRE, on the bottom of his business card, but guy doesn't know where he's at. It's a little bit, no one's going to really take him serious, rather than someone who's seasoned. You're in a smaller boutique firm, but more aggressive, where you know what you're saying, where what your mission is. Then it's different. You get to the point a lot quicker. You get the things solved a lot easier.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of what these landlords are missing out on. And it's easy to go with the big firms, but most of the time I see them, they just kind of blast it out on email blast, put it on LoopNet, and that's it.
That's it.
It's the easy thing to do.
I mean, the incentives, right? If you're getting fed from the teat, why would you go out of your way to, to go above and beyond? And I think that's what we are able to do as a boutique firm is, like you said, talk to the commissioners. We have a direct line with some of the local politicians that can help us with zoning issues, can help us with permits, and really that's the kind of service that we can offer that no one else can.
Yeah. It's important, man, to have these relationships in local government, with the mayor, with the commissioners, with the city engineer. Yeah. Not only that, having within our team, we have our engineers, we have the architects, we have the attorney, and having that team set up, ready, set in place, as soon as we have that client that needs help, that needs assistance, it's just as quick as a phone call. That makes us stand out from our competitors on a national scale.
Yeah.
Talk to us now. Now you're here at the Smith commercial. Well, it wasn't Smith, it was Mandich.
Right.
Working as a team. Walk us through your biggest deal, and I guess what you took from it.
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to do a deal with, while being now in the new, on that transition?
Before I go into that, I want to talk about the transition to coming here with Mandich, because it leads into the big deal. So, I was at Beacon, wanted to do bigger deals. I saw you were doing bigger deals, and I actually had already had a conversation with Brian Smith at JLL. Great guy. I've only had a handful of conversations with him, but every time I would berate him with questions, and he was always happy to oblige. And he told me, he's like, look, man, you just got to go after the bigger deals. Because I asked him, like, how are you getting these listings? And I didn't know what I didn't know back then, and I didn't know enough to be embarrassed to ask that, And he's like, look, that just came from being attracted to bigger deals. I sold them the building, and then I got the listing, and he said that's just where it all stemmed from. So from there, I was like, not only do I want to do bigger deals, I have to do bigger deals, if I want to get to where I want to be, eventually. So coming here, at the time, like the first week, you were negotiating like $100 million hotel deal, and my jaw was just on the floor. It's like the idea of that much money was just,
Man, you played it off pretty smooth. You were not impressed. I think it was like, yeah.
Oh yeah. 100 million. That's no big deal.
You would come back in the office and remind me, hey, don't forget to call.
Oh man. So then the cold calls changed from, I don't know what I'm doing, to, look, this is what you say, this is what you do, through your guidance, here's how it's going to go, this is the information you're trying to get. And now, at that point, it was like, oh, finally, I understand the roadmap. And it gave me a way to have better conversations and sound like I know what I'm talking about. I just started going down the list, and we were calling on cold storage facilities throughout Florida, 100,000 square feet and up, and called on one in Central Florida, really nice owner. We hit it off really well. And he said, look, I'm not going to sell right now, but you never know. I hate, my insurance company keeps jacking up my prices. And, you could tell, he just said it flat out. He was tired of the business. He'd been in it for 10 years. So I said, okay, I'm going to call this guy every month until I get the call that he wants to sell.
So that's great. So what made you, and this is a great topic because going into that a little bit deeper. So it's important to have your ear tuned to what these, owners are saying.
Yeah.
So it might not seem to anyone else that he might sell, but you picked up on those little, hey, maybe one day, or, maybe one day can seem 10 years from now, can be 10 years from now, but there's something in you that told you, okay, this guy might sell sooner.
It was the reps of calls. I talked to enough owners that were obviously not going to sell, that it was a different tonality. It was a different choice of words.
Was it a longer conversation? Was he talking longer on the phone?
Yes.
Those are signs.
Exactly.
They're expressing themselves more.
And I wouldn't have been able to pick up on any of that if I hadn't done the slog of 1,000 calls before that went nowhere. I forgot who it is, but someone has a great quote about looking at cold calls and sales as, you don't look at it as I need to make 1,000 calls. You look at it as, how many calls do I need to make to get to the yes?
Correct.
And just so get them out of the way as soon as you can, so that you can get to the yes as soon as possible, right? So that deal kind of sat on the back burner for a little bit. I just would follow up every month and a half, 2 months. And finally, last December, I got a call from him. It was right before Christmas. It was end of the year. He was probably hanging out with family. They're saying, when are you going to get out of this business? Some kind of conversation probably happened like that. And he left me a message and said, hey, Seth, I think I'm ready to talk. Let's see what we can do. And from there, I was like, oh, it's on. It's on. And, partners at the time, the Mandiches, were really interested in the space. They hit it off really well with the owner. And luckily, we got that one over the finish line. And,
awesome.
And that, that deal really was like, I knew it was possible, but now it was like, oh, I just did it. Now I have to do it again. And again.
It's real. It hit the account.
It's real. It hit the account. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
So now, the life of a broker. Tell us, how is it to be a broker and a father of 3 and a husband all at once?
Yeah.
Because I know it's been rocky, right? Coming into the office, making the calls. Your kids, obviously, they get sick, go to the hospital. There's 3, one gets sick, the other 2 get sick, the wife gets sick.
All the time.
Right?
Someone's sick all the time.
A week passes by, oh, they're sick again.
Yeah.
It's hard, I know. From personal experience, I know how that is. So
I think it's the conversation of, work-life balance. It's no such thing, really, But when I first decided to make the switch, my wife and I had a long conversation about, is this the right move for us? And through conversations with different brokers, I had a pretty good idea of what it would take. I said, look, to get to the higher income brackets that we want, it's going to take longer hours. I'm probably going to have to be gone some nights a week at events. Just thinking about how to prepare. Is this something that we want to do? And I said, look, I'm never going to put this above the family. You guys are the most important. That's why I'm doing this. So, having that conversation, and it's an ongoing conversation. And it's, I thought like, okay, well, we said it and we're done. But no, it's all the time. You're constantly having that conversation, So it's constantly a push and pull between wanting to spend time with the kids, right? and then also being really fired up to do well at your job. And having those two happening all the time is, I think, the hardest part, because once you're at work, you feel guilty for not being home. And once you're at home with the kids, you're kind of bored and want to get back to the office. You know, it's terrible, but those are the thoughts that I find myself having. Now, how we're working around it is day by day, meeting by meeting. And I think that's what's worked for us, and hopefully will continue to.
That's great. That's great. That's so true. So once the soundbite expires, you got to have that conversation again.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and it's almost like it all has to kind of be matched or even or on the same level, right? So at home, it has to be good. And work, you have to kind of, obviously you're not going to come every day wanting to kill it, right? We always have our ups and downs. Some days you're like, I don't want to hit the phones. I don't want to talk to nobody.
Yeah.
But it's really kind of blocking that out and coming to work, right? And being motivated, having that high energy, having that, motivation really, to make these calls, right? And I think that's why having that core group, so we can all sharpen each other to say, hey, let's do it, let's make the calls, 1 lead per day minimum.
Yeah.
So setting that tone is important, and having that environment is super important.
One thing I want to touch on is one of the reasons I decided to go to a small shop or a boutique shop and come here as opposed to one of the bigger shops like CBRE, JLL, is if I had gone to there, it would have been starting at the bottom, getting coffee, doing grunt work, probably having to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, not being able to leave till 5 or 6. And that was just an impossibility for my life at that time. And, the fact that we're a smaller team, we all have kids, we all understand what that's like, just means the world to me, because I wouldn't be able to do it without that understanding,
Yeah, and support,
and support.
I know how it is.
More importantly, support. Yeah.
No, man, that's we're grateful. I'm honored to have you on the team. So it's amazing.
Thank you, man.
An advice, a tip that you would give your younger self when you first started real estate, or anyone that's starting now. Let's say right now, anyone that's starting commercial real estate, they just got their license, they just hung it with a broker. What would you give them as a tip or an advice?
Start doing the hard stuff that you don't want to do right away. So all the cold calls, all the door knocking, all the CRM inputting of data, all this stuff that you're like, I don't want to do this. I'm not organized. I can't do this. I'm just going to wing it. It's going to be fine. All the stuff that I would put off, just do it and get it over with, because you get past it eventually. It's, you have to get the reps in. So the sooner that you get started doing those reps, and again, bringing it back to music, the sooner you accept that you're going to suck and you do it anyway, the faster you're going to get there, because I was very, when I started still in the music world, my transition, I kind of had to kill a part of myself to do this, not to make it too dramatic, but my whole identity was based around being a musician, so I kind of had to put that aside and say, okay, I'm going to do this now. This is what I'm doing. Right. That's a whole other conversation about who you are and what, who you identify as, does your work define you? That's another podcast in and of itself. I would tell myself, just start the calls, read the books, do all the stuff that you don't want to do, get it over with, because you have to do it anyway. You might as well save yourself time and get it over with.
What have you learned? One thing you've learned, at least it's been a little over a year now, right? That you've been with us. So one thing that you've learned with us or with the team that you would like to share?
The only limits that you have are the ones you place on yourself.
Awesome.
because I had, talking about the big deals, I thought, oh, well, you have to have a title. You have to, I guess I have a title now, but you have to have a title that is followed by CBRE, or, you have to be in a big shop. There's, that's a boys club, and to some extent it is, but the only reason that I was not really able to do that in the beginning is because I didn't think it was possible. It was all self-imposed.
Yeah.
And through being here, that all got taken down.
Yeah, man, it's crazy you say that, because at least in my shoes, when I was at the firm I started in, right, being an agent, that was everyone's mentality. They were going after the small deals. And even myself, I was nervous. I didn't think I would even see 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet in these businesses, and it would be intimidating to me, in the beginning. And I don't know what happened, I was like, screw this. I do know what happened. I think, obviously, my background in being a Christian removes all fear. The one thing is, fear is not of God. So I knew that. So I remember picking up the phone to make these calls. And one of the clients, the first deal I sold, owned a bunch of hotels. And I'm in an industrial booth in a firm, and I'm calling hotels. And everyone's like, what are you doing? I was like, dude, I'm going to sell a hotel. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
Making calls. And I sold the Sagamore Hotel, $63 million deal, which was, everyone's like, wow, this guy actually, obviously it wasn't, I was new. Lawsuit was involved, and things got a little dirty and messy, but
I learned a lot.
So, but great point about not having fear. In this business, you can't have fear. You got to dive into the big deals.
Yeah.
You do small deals, it's a great learning experience, because it's a lot of paperwork, a lot of small little edits back and forth.
Learn the mechanics.
The mechanics. You learn the mechanics, but after that, you shoot into the large deals.
Yeah.
That's it. No fear. Go after big deals.
Yeah.
Because that's what commercial real estate is about.
Yeah.
Making the big bucks.
The big bucks. It's funny, people would ask me, why are you going into commercial? What, because most people don't even know what warehouse, they don't even know industrial has brokers, right? So they're like, well, what about, can you sell this house? I'm like, no, I don't know. And the reason, one of the reasons I went to industrial and commercial to begin with is, like, I was already dealing with brides and grooms before the wedding. I don't want to deal with them afterwards to help them find a house.
That's hilarious.
And so I was like, no, I'm running as far away from that as I possibly can.
That's hilarious. Seth, man, it's been great.
George, thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
You're the man, bro.
You're the man.
You're the man. VP right here. Seth Woods. Guys, please smash that bell, subscribe, share, like, and stay plugged in for the next one.